It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them, so thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Craig Gunckel, Chief Executive Officer for Iconex. Craig joined Iconex back in 2017 with more than 20 years of expertise in the paper, packaging, and retail industries. He brings a proven track record of leadership and helping companies thrive. Prior to joining Iconex, he served as President Enterprise Solutions for WestRock, and during his tenure there, Craig held a variety of executive roles, including leading its merchandising displays and folding carton businesses. He currently serves on the board for the Wake Forest University Business School, the Purdue University Krannet School of Management, and the Atlanta Area Boy Scouts. Craig earned a bachelor's degree in organizational leadership from Purdue University. Craig Gunckel, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks, Brand. I'm excited to be here and look forward to spending some time together.
Yeah, wonderful to have you back. We had a nice chat a week or so ago and got to know each other a little bit through it. And you've had a wonderful career, and we've talked a lot about kind of transitioning from larger companies to the middle market. But let's start in the beginning. Tell us a little bit about your early family life, where you grew up, and your early family, your siblings, and mom and dad. Where were you, and what do they all do?
Sure. Well, I was born in Kansas City, Missouri.
All right.
And I've got an older brother and an older sister. My brother is about 4 years older than I am. My sister's about 6 years older.
Cool.
And we moved, I remember a few things from my early childhood, but we moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana when I was about 8 years old.
Okay.
And so basically I grew up in the Midwest. Went through grade school and high school and in Fort Wayne, and then ultimately ended up going to Purdue University.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's
Mom
great.
and dad, dad worked, mom worked in the home. What was the kind of the family structure?
Dad was a salesperson in the steel industry for most of his life.
Okay. Got it.
Ran some small businesses along the way. And my mom actually was a very successful dietitian, so she started a dietetic consulting firm when we moved to Indiana, and it ended up growing to be the largest consulting firm in Indiana, and Ohio, and Michigan. So she had a really cool career, built a nice little business, an entrepreneur. She's
the entrepreneur of the family.
Yeah, I said, fortunately, I got my mom's brain. She was valedictorian of her college class, and unfortunately, I got my dad's look. So,
well, better to have one of both, right?
Exactly. But they're both, really. My parents were born in the late 30s, and so they really were born at a pretty rough time in the country. Sure. My dad was in western Kansas and grew up on a wheat farm. So they understand the importance of a dollar, and taught me at an early age, hey, you work hard no matter what you do, and you save money. And to this day, I still use very little credit in my life. I pretty much do things that I've earned, and then I pay for things with them, which is what my dad taught me.
Awesome. Good student in school?
I was a great student in high school. I did very well. I'd say I was an okay student in college. Many young people went to college and had a lot of freedom and wasn't quite sure how to manage that at first, but so I figured it out. So I actually went to school. I was in the honors engineering program at Purdue.
Cool.
I ended up transferring out of that after a couple years, bounced around a bit, but ended up getting an industrial management degree. It's actually called organizational leadership, which it was actually great for me. As I got to college, I realized I really didn't want to be an engineer, and
Right.
and had worked my way through college in a manufacturing plant, literally driving fork trucks and things like that, and really fell in love with manufacturing. So kind of came together in college, and then I became a very good college student once I got really focused on what I wanted to do and
Found your
what I
passion.
wanted to become. Yeah, it was great. It was
What
great.
what attracted you to Purdue? What were some of the reasons behind going there?
Oh, geez. I'd like to say there was something really great, but the truth of the matter is I was looking at a lot of different schools, and I was a good athlete, so I had some opportunities to go do some different things at other schools. And one of my close friends went for a visit to Purdue, and his dad wasn't available to drive him down there, so I ended up going with him. And my sister actually went to Purdue as well, but and just kind of I don't know, just end up liking it, and
great
I actually
college
applied
community.
late. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a very diverse community. It doesn't get it's a lot bigger than people think, and it's a lot more diverse than people think.
Right,
It's in Indiana, but it is really an international school, which I loved about it. And again, it's a bigger school. People think that Purdue is relatively small, but I think there's roughly 40-some thousand undergraduates.
40,000. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And you mentioned sports. Did you play sports in high school and in junior high? What were the sports you pursued?
I did. I was like a lot of people my age. We played every sport growing up.
Yeah.
It's not like now where my kids are committed to one sport at a young age.
Right.
It feels like. But I was captain of my high school wrestling team and captain of my high school soccer team.
Cool.
So I was good at both those sports, and I loved soccer. Wrestling was like I was decent at it, so every year I had to lose weight, which I always hated.
And did you go on to play? Did you go on to wrestle or do any college sports?
I didn't. I had the opportunity to go wrestle a couple places, but I decided not to. I did play soccer my freshman year at Purdue, and then just got engaged in other activities, and it was just too much time consuming. But I played soccer at the kind of the club level and intramural level through my whole college career. In fact, really kept playing until my mid 40s, and my last soccer game, I went to the hospital in the ambulance, and my wife said, "I think it's time to stop playing soccer." I said, okay.
Always a good sign, right?
Yeah.
Always a good sign to stop. And what about entrepreneurial things? Did you follow in your mom's footsteps as a kid? Were there, the paper route or other things that you did to earn extra money while you're going through high school and junior high?
Oh yeah. I was from the age of 10. I always had a little business going. So I mowed lawns, and of course in Indiana, if you mowed somebody's lawn, you usually clean the driveway off in the winter. That's right. That's right.
Right.
So I did a lot of that stuff. I did actually have a paper route for a while, ironically. And then when I was 14 years old, I had to get my parents to sign a waiver to let me go work at Bill Knapp's, which was a restaurant. I was a busboy there, and then quickly became a waiter. And
cool.
So I kind of worked my way through high school, mostly doing that. Ended up
Tips
stocking
were good.
shelves. Yeah. They loved it. It was great. Then I ended up working third shift after I graduated from high school, before I went to college, third shift in a grocery store stocking shelves, which was a pretty interesting experience.
Yeah.
And like
union?
I said,
were you a union member there?
No.
Yeah.
But I was a union member when I was. So then I went to work for a company called Jefferson Smurfit Corporation, or CCA. When I was in college, like summer breaks and all that. Whenever I came home from college, they had a factory in downtown Fort Wayne, and I was in a union, and I did work there. And again, it was hard work, but great work. Today I'm still somewhat in that paper and packaging industry, where that company was in that industry, and it really taught me the appreciation of caring about my coworkers at all levels of the organization. It was a great experience, and I made good money. So I usually worked about 12 hours a day, 6 days a week during the summers, and so I would rack up a bunch of money to go back to college the next year.
Yeah. What was the first job out of college?
Went back to actually after my senior year, my junior year or whatever. I did an internship with that group in the accounting department, and so they hired me. Same company ended up hiring me out of college.
And that was in Fort Wayne, or where was that been?
Fort Wayne, Indiana.
Fort Wayne, yeah.
Yeah. So I think I can't remember what my title was, but anyways, I bought paper, and I managed a warehouse and scheduled the plants, and it was a great job. It was a lot of great experience. Learned a ton, but that was my first job out of college.
Yeah, awesome. And did you start managing people in that job, or did that come a little bit later?
No, I don't think I managed anyone in that job.
When was the first time you started doing that? Then was that once you went to Rock 10, or was that?
Yeah, well, I moved. I had the reason I left Fort Wayne is, like a lot of people growing up in your hometown, you're like, there's got to be something else I want to try. So a friend of mine had taken a job in North Carolina at a company called Waldorf, and the company I was working for, they had a big operational path, and again, most of my life changes were based upon really simple data inputs, which were, hey, I want to get into sales because the sales guys seem to have all the nice cars and do nice things. So,
get all the great dates.
Yeah. And so the company I was working for said, well, we're going to put you in this operations path, and I met this guy that was running this business in North Carolina. He says, well, if you come down here, I need a bunch of help for a couple of years fixing some stuff. You come help me fix stuff for a couple of years, and I'll give you a crack at sales. I said, okay. And it happened to be in Hickory, North Carolina, which is kind of the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was gorgeous. Sure. So I just kind of fell in love, and I had started dating my wife at the time, and I convinced her to move down there, and the two of us went and found a job. I had a job, she found a job, and we moved to North Carolina.
Was she from North Carolina, or she was up from Indiana?
No, I met Fort Wayne, Indiana. I met her in Fort Wayne, and I used my charm to convince her.
Lure her down.
Yeah, exactly. So
cool. So then you made that transition into sales. So were you an independent contributor at that time, or did you go and manage a sales team?
No, I still wasn't in sales. So I ended up, I did a bunch of stuff. I ended up managing a customer service group down there, and I did a bunch of different things. A lot of process work. I was kind of a Six Sigma person before Six Sigma was a buzzword.
TQM, was referred to as total quality back in that day, or was it a different?
It was some of that. I mean, a lot of it was just around basic process of just managing the flow of the plant, and so I wouldn't say we had any specific name for it. It was just my boss was a big fan of Ellie Goldratt at the time, so it was all about throughput and finding the constraint on throughput.
Efficiency. Yeah,
exactly. So anyway, so I started managing people. Probably was about 24, 25 years old. Cool. And about when that 2-year period came up and I was supposed to get my sales job, that's when Rock 10 bought Waldorf, and they fired the guy that made the deal with me, and so I was back to square one on that whole deal. But which then I just continued for the next year. Every time I saw the leadership of Rock 10 said, hey, I want a sales job. And I think they finally just got sick of me talking to them. So
asking so much, right?
Well, it's actually sort of a true story. They called me one day and they said, look, here's some car keys. Here's a laptop. You're going to move to Augusta, Georgia. It's the worst territory in the country. Good luck.
You really want it? Let's just give you a really good one, right?
Okay,
Mikey will eat anything.
That's right. They said, okay, big shot. Have fun. I said, okay, great. Thank you.
And tell us about that experience. Did you enjoy going into sales and that part of your career?
I really did. I had been really engaged with a lot of our large customers, and again, a lot of the process work we were doing at the plants, the items we ran for them, just making sure we could deliver things on time. I spent a lot of time out with our customers in their plants.
Right.
And so when I got into sales, I really viewed my job at the time as it was my own little business, and my job was not just to sell people stuff, but to provide a service and something that added value to our customers or added value to my clients at the time. And so, I really did inherit a really kind of interesting, tough territory. And I just methodically created lists of people I wanted to meet, and I would go meet them. And then once I got to know them, I'd just start offering ideas and solutions. In many cases, they were small businesses and had nothing to do with the product I was selling. I was just giving them ideas on help improve their business in other areas. And then I think they said, well, we'll give you a crack and buy something from you. And so I just kind of built my sales territory, and it was a great experience. It was a perfect role for me at the time.
Out on the road a lot, I imagine, right? Doing a lot of calls.
Out on the road a lot, yes. Out on the road a lot, and but it was really problem solving. It was also working internally with the resources I had. I had a knack for whatever resources we had, I would figure out a way to exploit those for our customers in a positive way.
Yeah.
And it was a really positive experience, and I had a lot of success. So yeah, it was fun. It was a lot
You
of fun.
managed the Eastern region, and then I think promoted to EVP and GM. So were you C-suite at that stage when you left Rock 10?
Oh yeah. So I went from being in sales to being a sales manager, relatively young age, made sales VP. I think it was about 2009 is when I got my first EVP role, which I would have been part of the executive leadership team at Rock 10. Yeah. And so I got a call from the CEO one day, and he said, hey, I needed to go move to Winston-Salem. And I, honest to God, to this day, he's a mentor of mine in life. His name's Jim Rubright. I love him to death. And I thought he was asking me to go run the sales group, and that somebody else was going to be running the business. And I was like, well, who's going to be running the business? And he's like, you're going to be running the business. I'm like, what? And so that was kind of my big break to move back into management or to operations, I would say, into really being a general manager and owning and running a P&L. And so that was back in '09. It was a very entrepreneurial business. It was, we were focused on helping large, big brand companies sell their products at retail and provide all the materials to do so. And so that was kind of my big break in '09. And then in 2014, Jim retired. We had a new CEO came into Rock 10, and he asked me to come back to Atlanta and assume the responsibilities of several other businesses. So I ended up, I can't even remember all the business, but at the peak I was running 4 or 5 businesses. Probably had a $3 billion plus P&L that I was responsible for. So at that point, I was when I ended up leaving WestRock, I was actually a president. I'd risen to a level of president, so I was one of 3 presidents in the company.
Right.
And had run a bunch of different businesses, had built some other internal organizations. So that got me to 2017.
Yeah, great. So back to those days at Rock 10, let's say before you moved, did you kind of feel like when Jim left and kind of lost a mentor that you needed to move on, or was it just a new opportunity with WestRock, or was that an evolution of that business? Tell us a little bit about that transition, because you were there about almost 20 years, right, at Rock 10 before you moved on.
23 years actually. I didn't feel that at the time. When Jim left, a guy that took this job was the CFO, and he and I had known each other a long time, and he was providing plenty of opportunity for me to grow and develop. So, it was great. I think, for me, it was interesting. We Rock 10, we were kind of the scrappy, we were always the underdogs. When I started with Rock 10, the company was $500 million. When Jim left, it was about a 11 or 12, but probably $11 billion business.
Incredible.
And then we did the merger with Midwest-Vaco, and that's when we became WestRock. We were a 15 or 16 billion dollar business. Don't get me wrong, I loved it. There was a lot of cool things about it, but that was kind of the time, I think, Brant, when I was like, I don't know, the CEO and I had slightly different ideas around culture and philosophy. And when you're at the level of organization I am, that's a tough place to be. So, over a year or so, we kind of both came to the conclusion, it's probably time for me to get out of here. And again, I had a wonderful career and have nothing but great things to say about my experience there. But it was more around this culture shift from, we became a major corporation versus, WestRock today is a Fortune 100 company.
Right.
And so in the process of being along the ride for a major corporation, it was all fun, but it started to feel a little bit too corporate for me.
You get a little detached from it, right? We talked about this the other day, right? You get to a point where you kind of don't feel like you're as much into the day-to-day. Did you miss that?
Of course, yeah. It was, but again, it was just it was a great experience, and but I'm a bit more of a free spirit and love to make things happen and create things, and it was getting harder and harder to do that in that it just the size of the company. So
sure. So you've been with Iconex since I think mid 2017, if I'm not mistaken. Were you recruited over there? Was that someone that you knew that had gone and pulled you over there? Knew someone on the board? Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Yeah, honestly, I was when I left WestRock, I wasn't really looking for a job. I didn't want a job. I just want to take some time off and decompress and. It's always, I think whenever you're in a job, you never think anybody will ever hire you again for anything. So, I was gone a day or two, and, we made the announcements. Within a few days, I started getting calls, and
phones ringing.
I was just, yeah, exactly.
Guys like me knocking at your door, right?
Exactly. And I was like, not interested. There was something about this guy, the way he approached it. And then he introduced me to one of the at the time wasn't a partner. He was a principal in the business, a guy named Mike Scher, and had a nice conversation with Mike. And I'll tell you the one funny story I think I shared with you the other day. And so I kind of got to know Mike a little bit. He was telling me about the job. He sent some information. I said, I'm interested, but I don't really want to do anything until next year. And they go, well, we need to do something earlier. along the way, he convinced me to fly to Greenwich, Connecticut to go meet with the founding partners of Atlas Holdings, who is the primary sponsor of Iconex.
Yeah.
And I remember driving to the Atlanta airport, calling my wife, going, Michelle, what am I doing? I just
I
wanted to get out of a situation.
Off.
Yeah. I just saw this stuff with the big companies. Like, now I'm flying to Greenwich, Connecticut to meet with private equity guys. Like, this is not my thing. And she laughed at me. And I ended up falling in love with those guys. And I said everything you should say during a process to get hired. I mean, why they hired me, I still don't know. But they're part of my family now. And I mean, really, it was more about I just really liked these people and I wanted to do something with them. And so this happened to be the thing they needed help with at the time, and so that's how I ended up at Iconex. I mean,
and how big
again,
was the
like I
company?
said, most of my career choices in life have been they're not that well thought out. So,
how big was the company at the time when you joined?
Geez, but it was a couple $100 million in revenue.
Yeah.
And I remember the first week I showed up, I remember calling my partners and saying, hey, this is a lot worse than what you guys kind of described. This is
there are a few more things under the carpet here.
Yeah, like you failed to mention the fact that the business is currently cash flow negative and a few other kind of key things. But no, I tease them about that. But it was a couple $100 million. It was struggling. It really was cash flow negative at the time because we were still getting off a very expensive TSA. We carved this business out from NCR. So it was a couple $100 million at the time, and I inherited a good part of the leadership team I still have today. They had been brought in a little bit before me. They were all relatively new, and we just set out. We put I'm a big strategy guy, Brent. So we sat down and put a strategy together, and we have just for the last 4 years, it's been there's been a lot of things thrown at us to try to knock us off base, but we just
pandemics,
pandemics. There was a shortage of all things. We're the largest. Well, I mean, literally, like even before the shortage of the pandemic shortage in 2018, late 2017, like 3 months after I start, we're the largest manufacturer of receipt paper in the world, which is like a commodity grade of paper.
Yeah.
There's this chemical called leuco dye that all of a sudden there was a global shortage of, which happens to be the main thing used to make thermal paper. So there was a shortage of the one thing we had to have to run the company. So but it was fun, man. So the last 4 years we've just stuck to the strategy. Yeah. And done some amazing things along the way, and built a business today that is, roughly $500 million. We're not cash flow negative, I can assure you that, or actually EBITDA is quite strong.
I don't think you would have stayed there that long if that was really the case. Great.
It's been fun, and we're constantly looking at new acquisitions and new things. We had a couple big deals. One got killed by the European Competition Authority. It would have taken us to almost $750 million. So, we've done some really cool stuff after the last 4 years, and it's been a blast.
How many employees now?
People always ask me that. And we have roughly
last count.
It's hard to keep up because we have about 50 or 80 positions open right now in the U.S. Yeah. But I think in the U.S. we're around, let's say, roughly 700, 750, and in Europe we're about 100, 150. So globally we're between about 800, 850 people.
Operations in Latin America and Asia as well, or are those expansion opportunities for you?
No and no.
Okay.
We had a business in Asia. We exited. We had a business in Chile that we exited. So we part of our strategy was to focus on the markets we thought we could win, which were U.S., Canada, we could say North America. We don't really sell into Mexico, although we have a plant there. And Europe. So we've really been focused on Europe and North America.
Yeah, plenty of opportunity there. Cool. So over this arc of 20 plus years of experience, if you talk to me a little bit about leadership, some of the key leadership lessons you've learned from, the early days, obviously the long term that you spent at Ten Rock, and then has that evolved to West Rock, and now you're with obviously a smaller middle market size company and growing like crazy. If you had to kind of just identify those 2 or 3 leadership lessons, what would they be?
I always start when people ask me this question, especially, a lot of my young coworkers, I'll say, what do you want to do? And they'll say things like, well, I want to do what you do. I'm like, well, do you have any idea what I do? It's like, I think people get lost in the idea of I want a bigger job versus what does that actually mean?
Yeah.
And one of the things I've learned really over the last 4 years as being a CEO is, the value of how important wisdom is in everything that you do as a leader. And I define wisdom, not as I've gotten old and so I know more than everybody else. It's simply it's a collection of experiences. And so I've been really blessed over the last 25, 20, 30 years, whatever, of my life, to have a number of unique and different experiences. I've done business all over the world. I've managed different areas of businesses. And so what happens now is when a major problem presents itself to the organization, I have some basis to say, this is important, we need to do something about it, or hey, we don't need to make a decision today, let's just see how this plays out. Right. And so I think the advice I like to give my younger coworkers is, develop those experiences, because you can't be an effective leader if you don't have some basis of wisdom at a scale, like being a CEO. It's hard to be the leader of a major company or a good-sized company without having some basis of knowledge there. So that's one thing I always say is, and the reason I always tell young people that is because I remember being 30 years old, looking at the people at the top of the organizations I were in going, I could do that job. That doesn't seem that hard. And I don't think I could have in retrospectively. I mean, I think I would have figured it out probably, but the value of wisdom is a lot more important than I understood 20 years ago. I think the other thing is it's really hard for people to get leadership experience anymore in corporate America. So few people have real P&L responsibility, even in big companies.
So many matrix organizations. Shared responsibility.
Very isolated at the top. So I always encourage people, hey, look, you're going to get your leadership opportunities at the company. And at Iconex, like we want our coworkers to be engaged and empowered to make decisions. But still, at the end of the day, there's only a couple P&L owners that happen to report to me that so I always encourage people, go find those leadership opportunities outside of work. So, coach a kid's soccer team, get involved in your church, get involved in the school, get involved in the community, serve on a charitable organization's board, expose yourself to leadership opportunities outside of work, which I found I didn't understand as I was doing those things. I was just kind of like, again, people would ask me to help out and I had a hard time saying no. But those different opportunities to lead in those circumstances really, there's one thing to have, you probably know the definition of power much better than I do, but look, when you're the boss and you have power as CEO, I can tell people what to do, but when you're sitting on a charity board and you have to convince and listen and understand, that's a great way to get like a great leadership opportunity. I think the other thing that is really, I don't know if it's changed or maybe it was always there, is I remember getting out of college just thinking I just need a job. Like I wasn't thinking about what that particular
bills I need to pay.
Exactly. But the thing I've learned today is just the importance of really connecting and caring about the people that you work with. That's I use a phrase called coworker. I don't ever use the word employee because these aren't my employees. These are my coworkers. Right. And we all have jobs to do. We all have to report to somebody. But to really, value what everyone can bring to the table, and everyone's going to have some good days and everyone's going to have some bad days, and to take care of and nurture and develop the people around you. Again, I think typically when you're young and you're trying to climb that ladder, it's not, the more of you make it a competition against the person next to you, the less likely you're going to be a great leader. It's like figure out how to make those people around you better and better and better. And again, I think it was different 30 years ago. Honestly, I think it was like, you just head down, get your work done. And if you do good work, you'll get the promotion. Now it's more, a little bit emotional IQ is way more important today than it was 30 years ago. Sure, and so absolutely. I think I've learned that over the years.
You've had a good mentor in Jim. I'm sure there's been other coaches and teachers you've had along the way. But, usually over the arc of a career of 25, 30 years and women of our age, there's a few tormentors in our past as well. And without mentioning any names, tell us about times when you kind of just saw some really bad behavior and just said to yourself, I'm just never going to do that, or I need to make a change because, boy, I've been treated that way, and I never want anyone else to feel that same way.
Yeah, well, I won't give any names, but I think one of the risks to be, if I think about the people in my life, I'm like, wow, that person was a negative influence. And in fact, in one case is a really accomplished, smart person. And
Yeah.
and the way I describe this person's leadership is like, they're like the sun. The earth needs the sun, plants, we all need the sun to survive. And if you're a long way away from the earth, you really appreciate the sun. Like, the sun's great. Like, I love the sun. Like, everybody loves the sun. And then the closer you get to, you're like, wow, it's a little warm up here. and in my case, I was, this was my boss, and
Down
it
the
was
hall.
like,
Right.
it's like the sun just constantly burned me. I didn't know when to put sunscreen on all the time. And so,
Right.
I think one thing to learn about is, again, kind of going back to do your best as a leader to treat everybody consistently
Right.
and transparently, and don't make it seem like to one group of people, oh, this person's great and cares about all of us, when the reality is you're just beating the tar out of the people that are closest to you. And that I've seen that in a couple of occasions where someone's image is one thing, but the reality of how they deal with their own team is pretty harsh. I think the biggest things for me is you got to let people make decisions. You got to let people fail. The worst leaders I've ever seen. And again, I have this. I think you and I talked about this. I think in the world today, we've developed a lot of corporate managers and not so many leaders.
Right.
And I think the worst leaders I see are corporate managers. They're the ones that just will not let people make decisions around them. Yeah. And will not let people fail. And at the end of the day, it just frustrates the people. If you never get to make a decision, even if the person that's making the decision makes good decisions, you start to lose your perspective and value. Like, you just do your job. I don't, So I always tell people, it's like, I'm not hiring you to come on board at Iconex for me to do your job. I'm expecting you to do it, and I'll keep you on the rails, but you got to figure out how to make good decisions and do that. Yeah. So I think the worst leaders and corporate managers I've seen are also they just don't let people make decisions and are so. I think it's like a self-preservation. Yeah, but I think it comes down to like self-preservation. They're so scared that if their organization makes a mistake, that their career is going to be over. Like they won't take any risks, so. I could go on and on, but fortunately, I've been surrounded by really good leaders most of my career, so I don't have too many bad examples.
And you're bringing in a lot of millennials, right? You're now hiring them and training them, perhaps even some in middle management, and that's kind of a different group. I mean, I've certainly experienced it with my own kids, let alone those in my organizations, and a lot of old-time CEOs are kind of more comfortable with having their questions answered rather than their answers being questioned.
Yeah, that's good. Well said.
And how do you kind of deal with that? I mean, have there been instances where you've been in meetings where it's like, oh my gosh, that junior level director just spoke up, and that's a really good point. How do you deal with that? And is that something that occurs and you encourage within the corporate culture at Iconex?
I hope it occurs in every meeting I'm in, because I really do encourage that. I no problem making a decision, but I really like to solicit a fair amount of diverse input. And we have an executive coach that we work with at our executive team at Iconex, and one of our biggest topics we talk about is candor and the importance of everybody being honest with one another, to the point like sometimes I just say, hey, look, I'm just going to remove myself from the room, because I know get into some of these topics, if I'm in the room, it changes the dynamic. And so
people aren't going to say anything. Yeah, right.
So I love candor. I actually end just about every meeting that I host with anybody else have anything to offer, any complaints, any good stuff, bad stuff, and people, especially now with COVID, when you're on all these video calls, I will individually go through everybody on the phone saying, got anything? You sure? Okay, great. And I love it. I love when people, I do have it'll sound awful, but if you think through the logic, it makes sense. It's like, it's very hard to win an argument with your boss. It's very easy to win a debate. Mm-hmm. And people say, well, that's a little old school. I was like, it's not old school at all. No. Arguments are based on opinions. Debates are based on facts. So if I don't care how much experience or how young or old that you are in the company, if you come to me and you have a really solid set of data-based facts and you want to debate with me why what I'm doing is wrong, I'm easily convinced with data and facts.
Yeah.
But if you come to me with like, hey, I think this, but I don't have anything to back it up, I'm like, well, good. Thanks for sharing that. I think when you can create a really transparent organization full of candor, that's a data-based organization, and you debate things on the merits of facts, I love it. I mean, to sit in a conference room and have people throw out opinions, and that gets back into the corporate America politics stuff. It's like, not so high on that. But and I also would say about millennials, I think millennials get a bad rap. I do think there are two really generations within the millennial generation, which is, there is the generation that everybody likes to talk about that is, doesn't like to get out of bed and has their own, it's all about me, feel entitled. And there's no doubt that part of that generation exists. But what I find is the majority of the millennials that I've ever worked with are the opposite of that. I mean, they're very driven. They really want to be successful. They do want to learn.
And they want to be heard.
They want to be heard.
Yeah.
But they're not demanding like, hey, my voice is more important than the next voice. Like, hey, I have an opinion. I'd like you to listen to it. But I find that I think, and I happen to sit on a couple business school boards, and whenever I go back to these universities and I sit and meet with these young folks, I mean, these aren't millennials anymore. I don't know what the current generation is, but some unbelievably talented young people in this world that will eventually take over all these big leadership positions, and I think our future's pretty bright in that regard.
Yeah, awesome. Company culture is the job of the CEO, and some would say number one job. Tell us a little bit about what's kind of unique or different about the Iconex culture, and how do you propagate that? What do you do to ensure, particularly with new people that come in, and you've got diverse operations in Europe, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about that. What's the culture, and how do you keep it plugged?
Well, listen, I think our culture we have kind of 5 tenets to our culture, but it's the most important one is the safety of our coworkers, the health and safety of our coworkers around the world. And so we spend a lot of time focused on making sure people understand that your safety is way more important to us than any dollar we'll make and anything we do. Brant, we have a lot of things we do every day, every week, every month to drive that message, including I do at least one video a month that goes out to the entire company talking about what's happening on the safety front. I talked earlier, another key, really I think the second most important thing to me in the organization is integrity. We make, now, and I define integrity as doing the right thing when no one's looking, what is the right thing to do? And so, we are not going to make an unethical decision. We're not going to do something unethical. We're not going to set a precedent. We're not going to, we're going to operate our company with integrity 100% of the time across all levels of the organization. And how do we back that up? Listen, to some degree, it's the carrot, here's the behaviors that we're going to reward people for. And some it's a stick. If we have somebody that does something that is we have a zero tolerance for things around integrity, especially when we get into inclusive issues and we get into business decisions, like really financial, ethical business decisions. So some of it's the carrot, like we reward you for your behavior, but some is candidly is a stick. It's like, hey, if you do that, you just won't work here anymore. So that's a big part of our culture. And we've made some big decisions that we drove through the industry that changed the industry that no one had the guts to do before. And it cost us money, but it was the right thing to do.
Cool.
I love having engaged coworkers and empowered coworkers. So, I really do try to force decisions down to the closest level in the organization where they should be made, not at a high level. I don't know that happens all the time. I think we're getting better and better at it. But, one of the way I reinforce that is like, I just won't make a decision for somebody if I think it's their decision. Like, you got to go figure this out.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not sure that always happens all levels of organization, but I think we're getting better and better and better in that area, and so we're pleased with that. I think the other thing is there's a little bit of a pun included in this. Our strategy is based upon the teachings of a guy named Roger Martin, who I happen to be was close enough to work with him personally for a couple years at WestRock, and he wrote a book called Playing to Win, which is all about strategy. And so, one of the last things I think about culture is I want people on my team that want to win and not just come to work. I want people to come to work with a purpose. I want them to say, hey, this is the best thing to do, and this is why it's going to help us win. And I always equate it to, I'm a golfer, and I always equate it to, hey, I got my buddies I play golf with that like to go out, mess around, have a couple beers. They don't care about winning. And I got people I know are out there, they're practicing and they're driving hard.
Getting their handicapped, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love to play golf with the guys that like drink beer. In fact, that's probably where I fall into on the golf course. But it's when I'm talking about on the company side, I really want that person that wants to be prepared, wants to work hard, wants to win, not just like, hey, I'm doing this because I got nothing better to do on a Tuesday morning. So, I think those are the kind of the key culture things. How we drive that is behaviors. It's the behaviors we reward. It's the behaviors we exhibit. It's a decision.
People are always looking at you, Craig, just like your kids, right? They're always looking to see how you're behaving, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And so, anyways, and again, I think through COVID, we've tried to over communicate. COVID is a great example where I think we became, as leaders of the company, the data point for our coworkers on what was true and what was not true. They were hearing so much stuff, so we tried to say, hey, look, this is what's important to the company. This is how it's going to impact you, how it's going to impact us, how it's going to impact the economy, and really, communicate every day the things that are important. Social justice issues last year, we explained to people what our position was and why it mattered to them, the company. And so, whatever it is around culture, we try to not only reinforce with our behaviors, but also talk about it and be transparent and communicate with people.
Cool. We got a couple more questions, but we're getting close to the end of our time. But I do have to ask you about this. I told you one of the motivations for this podcast was, a millennial challenged me on, well, do you think you really know all the answers as to why, people get hired elsewhere? and my response was no. And so my question to you is, what do you do? I mean, how do you make those decisions about the people you want to invest in and hire personally? What do you look for? Because it's so hard to do it in an interview situation.
Yeah, I think it's I can tell you one of the key things for me is, can this person process data and think independently? So that's like a big thing, which that sounds like, oh, everyone can do that. It's not that simple. When you look at someone's resume and talk to them, you can kind of go, okay, I see where they've done some things in this area. I like people that are doers. One thing that I don't like is when I ask somebody what they do within the first 15 seconds of interview, they can tell me how many people report to them in their organization. I don't. You ask me the question earlier, I don't even know. Right. I mean, is it important? I'm sure. I mean, we know as a company, but it's like, it's not how many people you manage. It's not how big your organization is. It's what are you doing to impact change? And so it's a turnoff for me when people try to tell me how big their job is or was, and it's more of a turn on when people say, look, here's the things I did to impact change in this person or this organization or this thing, which again is hard to get to, but I think you've done enough interviewing, Brad. It's easy to see when you see it. You're like, okay, this person is it. So I go back to candor. I want people on my team. I'm not going to hire somebody I think is just, there's no question. And I have a strong personality, and I can't hire someone that's I think, well, this person's not going to stand up to me. I need somebody that's going to challenge me. So I'm not looking for people to say yes, exactly. Right. So I think those are some of the big key things. I am, experience to me is important, but it's not as like I'm not one of these people who thinks you got to have 30 years of industry experience to know how to, most industries aren't that complicated. Diversity of thought is important to me. I think we do try to be extremely inclusive at Iconex, and we do have a relatively diverse company. And it's not a black-white thing, male-female thing. It's just I like to have a lot of diversity of thought. I need old and young and operations and sales and accounting. And, so having a diverse group of people and people that understand the importance of diversity of thought is also kind of a key thing for me when I'm hiring somebody to be at the executive level. Yeah,
cool. Last question, which we usually ask, you already answered. So I've got to rephrase it a little bit. That's the kind of life advice you'd give to someone else. So I'm going to ask it to you this way. Thinking back to where you were, kind of in your late 20s, early 30s, which is really the target zone of our listenership, right? Most of the folks that listen to this podcast are kind of at that career. They're in their first job. They're advancing through middle management. They're taking a look around. What would you tell your younger self at that age about your career? Would you say do this differently, or keep to the course? Or looking back, what advice would you give that younger 27, 32-year-old Craig?
Well, this might be a little bit earlier than 27 or 32, but when I do talk to kids coming out of school or management school, whatever, my simple advice is live, learn, live, and lead. Keep learning no matter where you are. And the younger you are, you're going to be more heavy weighted on the learning side. Think about people in their 27s to 30s. If I had one complaint about my professional career, I clearly sacrificed probably some of my family life and time with my wife and kids when they were young.
To travel. Yeah.
Travel and just 100-hour weeks. And so don't forget to live a little bit. And I think I remember when my kids were young, I had another great mentor. His name's Mike Capira. I said, hey, man, these kids are going to grow up,
Yeah.
Spend time with them, spend time with them. Yeah, it happens quicker than you think. And here I am, just my oldest son's now a sophomore at Clemson, and it was like, wow, how'd that happen? And so, I think about learning when you're young. You always got to keep learning, but it's going to be overweight when you're young. I think living your life. So I think young adults, I shouldn't say kids. I'm getting old now, so it's the wrong word. But I think these young adults, 25 to 35, it's okay to have a little fun and live. You don't. I see so many 30-year-olds that you just like, man, this person's just going to be burnt out in 5-10 years. It's live your life a little bit. Keep learning, live, and then start to transition into being a leader and taking on leadership responsibilities. And then the older you get and the more mature you get, that's when you're going to be ready to take on big leadership things. So I think that age group is career-wise, keep doing what you're doing. Be patient. Like I said earlier, when you're 30, you think you're smarter than the CEO. That's what I was. Everybody thinks that. But keep learning, be persistent, do what you have an opinion. I think you want to get noticed in a company. If you're just going to show up and kind of put the spreadsheets together and never really offer solutions, the people that get noticed do the hard work, and then they earn the right to walk into the CEO's office. They have an idea. You should take a look at this and so be persistent with those ideas. But you can also be respectful. It's not your job is not to get your 45-year-old boss fired so you can have their job. That usually doesn't work out that way anyway. But would I go change? I don't know, man. I wish I could say I had a really calculated, prescriptive way. What I mostly tell young people is don't try to do it the way Craig Gunckel did it. Because I'm not sure how it actually worked out for me, but reality is like everybody's got a story, and make it your story, and don't miss. I guess it goes back to my philosophy now that wisdom is really important, which is why when you're 25 to 35, live life a little bit, because if you're spending most of your day, all you're doing is your job and whatever company you work for, thinking about what they do, and you're not expanding your horizons on your emotional IQ, just your general intelligence about the world and the economy and how people, really how people interact with one another, you're never going to be ever really to transition into a bigger role. You have to have a bigger perspective than what you're currently doing, if that makes sense. I just said a lot there. Again, most things I say in context, there's too much there, but hopefully that'll resonate with somebody.
Well, Craig Gunckel, CEO at Iconex, thank you so very much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
You got it. Thank you, Brent, for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.